The polish on the silver tray was so perfect she could see the warped reflection of her own face, the dark blue of her uniform a smudge against the gleaming surface. Its weight was familiar in her hands, a solid, grounding presence in a house built of shadows and whispers. The crystal glasses chimed softly with each careful step she took down the marble hall. She was just a maid, a ghost in a blue dress, there to serve and be unseen. That was the job. That was the safety. She had learned the rhythm of this place, the quiet footfalls of the security men, the low murmur of business conducted behind closed doors, the specific, resonant timbre of his voice. Dante Moretti. His name was a secret she kept even from herself, a dangerous word she enjoyed thinking too much. She approached the living room, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. The voices from within grew clearer. His, a low baritone that could cut through steel, and another man's, smoother, with an American accent that felt slick and out of place here. She was meant to enter, place the tray of iced water on the mahogany table, and retreat. It was a simple task she had performed 100 times. But the heavy oak door was ajar, not by much, just a sliver. Through it, she heard a name that made her pause, her hand hovering just before the gilded handle. The name of Dante's younger brother, Luca, who had died 5 years ago. No one ever spoke his name. It was a tragedy. What happened to Luca? The American voice said. Marcus Thorne. She had seen him before, always dressed in suits that seemed too loud for the quiet luxury of the mansion. A betrayal from your own ranks. It must keep you up at night, wondering who you can really trust. The silence that followed was heavier than the tray in her hands. She imagined Dante sitting in his usual chair, his posture utterly still, his dark eyes holding thorns. He never fidgeted. He never wasted a single movement. Trust is earned, Marcus. Dante's voice was dangerously soft. And it is easily lost. Is it? Thorne's voice was laced with a smug confidence that made Olivia's skin crawl. Because the man who gave the order that night, the one who sold your brother out to the Albanians, he's still out there. And my sources tell me he's getting nervous. He's looking for a new ally. Someone powerful enough to protect him from you. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. This was not business. This was something else entirely. Something raw and bleeding. My family's affairs are my own, Dante said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a sound more menacing than any shout. Of course, Thorne said. But you and I both know the city is a small town for men like us. Information is currency. And I happen to be holding a great deal of it. The name of the man who killed your brother. That's a valuable piece of information. The kind of thing that could secure a partnership. The kind of thing that could guarantee my shipping containers pass through your docks without any unforeseen inspections. It was blackmail. So blatant, so audacious, that Olivia felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Thorne was using the ghost of Dante's brother to threaten him. He wasn't just a business partner, he was a vulture picking at an old, deep wound. And then Thorne said the words that shattered the world. I was the one who brought him to you, Dante. I vouched for him. Just like I'm asking you to vouch for me now. It would be a shame if history were to repeat itself. The implication was unmistakable. Thorne wasn't just reporting on the betrayal. He was confessing his part in it. He had delivered the traitor to Dante's door all those years ago. He was the source of the rot. The shock of it, the sheer venom in the admission, made Olivia's fingers go numb. The heavy silver tray tilted. One of the crystal glasses slid, then another. She tried to catch it, a clumsy, desperate grab, but it was too late. The tray crashed to the marble floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot through the cavernous hall. Crystal shattered. Water spread in a dark, accusing pool. Silence. The voices inside the room stopped. Every sound in the mansion ceased. There was only the frantic, panicked hammering of her own heart. She had heard everything. And they knew it. The door swung open. Dante Moretti stood there, filling the frame. He was not a tall man, but he had a density, a presence that consumed the space around him. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. His eyes, the color of dark, bitter coffee, found her. They were not angry. They were not surprised. They were cold. utterly, terrifyingly cold. Like a winter lake, placid on the surface, with a killing frost just beneath. He looked down at the mess of broken glass and water, then back up at her face. He saw the fear there. He saw that she had heard. Behind him, Marcus Thorne peered out, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features before being replaced by a dismissive smirk. He saw a servant, a nobody. Dante saw something else. He saw a liability. "Clean this up," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. He turned to Thorne. "Our meeting is over." "Dante, we were just getting to the important part," Thorne began to protest. "It is over," Dante repeated, and the finality in his tone was absolute. He did not look at Thorne again. He simply waited. Thorne, after a moment's hesitation, gave a tight nod and walked past him, shooting Olivia a look of contempt as he went. Now it was just the two of them. The mafia boss and the maid who knew too much. She expected him to yell, to call for his men, to drag her to the basement she had heard rumors about but never seen. She braced herself for it, her body trembling as she knelt to pick up the larger shards of glass. But he just stood there, watching her. The silence stretched, thin and sharp as the edges of the broken crystal. She kept her eyes down, her world reduced to the mess at her feet. She believed her life in this house was over. She believed her life itself might be over. But Dante did something she never could have predicted. He did not fire her. He did not punish her. He stepped back into the living room and spoke a name. Marco. One of his guards, a man built like a refrigerator, appeared instantly. "Boss." "From now on," Dante said, his eyes still fixed on Olivia's trembling form, "she will work for me. Directly. My study, my quarters. Nowhere else. No one else speaks to her. Is that understood?" "Yes, boss," Marco said, his face impassive. Olivia looked up then, confused. This was not a dismissal. It was a promotion. It was a prison sentence. She would no longer be a ghost, drifting through the halls. She would be under his constant, watchful eye. She thought she was being cast out. But she was being pulled in, deeper than she had ever imagined possible. She was no longer invisible. She was a specimen under a microscope. And the man holding the lens was the most dangerous man she had ever known. Her world, once as large as the sprawling mansion, now shrank to the size of a single man's shadow. Her duties were simple and relentless. She brought him his morning coffee, black and scalding. She organized the papers on his vast oak desk, careful not to disturb the single, silver-framed photograph that sat in the corner. She dusted the shelves of leather-bound books he never seemed to read. She was always there, a silent fixture in his private world. And he was always aware of her. She never saw him look at her directly for more than a second, but she felt his gaze like a physical weight. It was a constant, unnerving pressure at the back of her neck. He was watching her, waiting for a mistake, a sign that she was a threat. The fear she felt that first day never truly faded. It simply changed shape, becoming a low, humming current beneath the surface of her new routine. But with fear came a strange kind of intimacy. In this forced proximity, she learned the man, not just the myth. She saw the exhaustion that sometimes settled deep in the lines around his eyes late at night. She noticed the way he would unconsciously rub his left shoulder when he was stressed, as if soothing an old injury. And she saw the way his eyes would sometimes drift to the photograph on his desk. It was of two young men, almost boys, with the same dark hair and serious eyes. One was clearly a younger Dante. The other, she knew with a sickening certainty, was Luca. He never touched the frame, but his attention would linger on it, and in those moments, the coldness in his expression would crack, revealing a chasm of grief so profound it stole the air from the room. His wound was not just a memory. It was a living thing. Marcus Thorne continued to visit the mansion, his presence a slick poison in the air. He would nod to Olivia with that same smug smirk, his eyes lingering on her a moment too long. She understood now that he saw her not just as a maid, but as a piece on the board, a witness Dante was foolishly keeping close. She felt Thorne's calculation, and it terrified her more than Dante's cold silence. One evening, Thorne had a meeting with Dante in the study. She served them drinks and was dismissed. She retreated to the hall, her instructions to remain just outside the door. She stood there, ostensibly polishing a silver vase, but her attention was fixed on the low murmur of their voices. The meeting ended sooner than expected. Thorn left first, looking pleased with himself. Dante remained inside. Olivia waited a few moments before entering to clear the glasses, as was her duty. As she stepped into the room, she saw it. Thorn had paused on his way out, bending down as if to tie his shoe near the far side of Dante's desk. Her eyes narrowed. It was the wrong side, the side visitors never used. When she entered, her gaze went straight to the spot. Tucked just under the ornate wooden lip of the desk, almost perfectly concealed in shadow, was a tiny black disc. A listening device. Her heart leaped into her throat. Thorn was not just blackmailing Dante. He was spying on him. Her first instinct was to run, to find Marco, to tell someone. But what would they do? It would cause an uproar. It would confirm to Dante that she was trouble, that chaos followed her. And it would reveal to Thorn that she had seen it. He would know she was not just an oblivious servant. She had a choice. She could pretend she hadn't seen it. She could tell one of Dante's men. Or she could handle it herself. She made her choice. Her loyalty, unasked for and unacknowledged, was to the man who held her captive. She waited, her body tense, listening for any sound of Dante returning. The house was quiet. Moving with a swiftness that surprised even herself, she knelt by the desk, her fingers finding the small, cold disc. She plucked it from its hiding place, her touch deft and sure. She stood, cupping it in her palm. It felt obscene, a tiny, technological serpent in the heart of the house. Without a second thought, she dropped it to the floor and brought the heel of her sensible black shoe down on it. It cracked with a faint, satisfying crunch. She kicked the tiny fragments of plastic and wire further under the heavy desk, where they would disappear into the deep pile of the Persian rug. A floorboard creaked behind her. She froze, her back to the door. Olivia. His voice. He had returned. She turned slowly, her face a carefully blank mask, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. He was standing in the doorway, watching her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He looked from her face, which was surely paler than usual, down to the floor where she had just stood. He took a step into the room, his gaze sweeping the area around his desk. He knew. She wasn't sure how, but he knew she had done something. He didn't ask. He didn't demand an explanation. He just held her gaze, a long, silent appraisal that felt more intrusive than any interrogation. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. He was reassessing her, she realized. Seeing her for the first time not as a frightened girl who had dropped a tray, but as someone who moved with purpose in the shadows. Finally, he spoke her name again, but it sounded different. Olivia, the word was quieter this time. Heavier. It was not an accusation. It was an acknowledgement. Then he simply walked to his chair and sat down, picking up a pen as if nothing had happened. But something had. A line had been crossed. And they both knew it. Therefore, his watchfulness changed. It was no longer the predatory stillness of a man waiting for a sign of betrayal. It became something else, something protective. She began to notice Marco, or another of his men, always positioned discreetly down the hall from the study. When she was sent to the kitchens, one of them would invariably be there, inspecting a delivery or speaking quietly with the chef. She was still a prisoner, but the nature of her cage had changed. He was no longer watching her. He was watching over her. This new dynamic was a strange, suffocating kind of care. The tension between them didn't lessen. It coiled tighter, a wire pulled taut in the space they shared. There were moments when she would look up from her work to find him watching her, his dark eyes intense, a question lingering in their depths that he never asked. She would quickly look away, her cheeks burning, the unrequited affection she'd harbored for him twisting into something more complex and dangerous. It was no longer a secret crush on a powerful employer. It was a connection forged in fear and a shared secret, a loyalty he hadn't demanded, but that she had given freely. The game between Dante and Thorn escalated. The visits became more frequent, the tension during their meetings more palpable. Olivia, now attuned to the subtle currents of the house, could feel a storm gathering. She would catch snippets of conversation, words like deadline and the commission and a final offer. She knew Thorne was pushing Dante into a corner, and that men like Dante Moretti did not allow themselves to be cornered. One afternoon, she was dusting in the hall just outside the study when she heard Thorne's voice, raised slightly in frustration. "Fine. We'll settle it tomorrow night. My place. The warehouse by the docks. Just you and me, Dante. We'll share a drink, finalize the details. Bring a bottle of that 20-year Balvenie you're so fond of." A gesture of goodwill. "I will be there." Dante's reply was a low growl. The words sent a blade of ice through Olivia's veins. A warehouse. Just the two of them. It was a trap. She knew it with an instinct that went deeper than logic. Thorne was not a man who settled things over a friendly drink. He was a man who set fires and watched them burn from a safe distance. Dante was walking into an ambush. Panic seized her. She had to warn him. But how? If she told him what she suspected, he would demand to know how she knew. It would unravel everything. Her eavesdropping, her crushing the bug. He would see her as a spy, a conspirator. He would never believe she had acted to protect him. Her word against a man he had, for years, considered a business associate. She would be silenced, permanently. The day of the meeting arrived, a heavy gray sky pressing down on the city. Dante spent the afternoon in his study, calm and focused, preparing. Olivia moved around him in a haze of terror, her mind racing. As evening approached, he rose from his desk and went to the ornate liquor cabinet against the far wall. He retrieved a dark, heavy bottle of whiskey. The Balvenie. He was really going. He placed the bottle on his desk, next to a briefcase, and turned to leave the room to get ready. In that moment, watching him walk away, an idea, desperate and insane, took root in her mind. She couldn't stop him with words. But perhaps she could stop him with chemistry. Her mother had been a nurse, and Olivia had inherited a practical, if basic, knowledge of medicines. She remembered the powerful sedatives her mother had sometimes spoken of, drugs that worked quickly, that could incapacitate a person without causing permanent harm. The head of household kept a small infirmary, stocked for any of the family's emergencies. It was a monstrous risk. She would be drugging the head of the Moretti family. If she was caught, if she miscalculated the dose, he would kill her without a second's thought. But the image of him walking into Thorne's trap was more terrifying than the thought of his wrath. Her heart hammering against her ribs, she moved. While he was upstairs, she slipped out of the study and down to the infirmary. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled as she searched the locked cabinet she knew how to pick from her teenage years of minor rebellion. She found what she was looking for, a small vial of clear liquid. She took only a tiny amount in a syringe, just enough. Back in the study, her hands moved with feverish precision. She carefully broke the wax seal on the whiskey bottle, used the syringe to inject the sedative through the cork, and then painstakingly resealed the top with a bit of wax melted from a candle on the desk. It was almost perfect. Almost undetectable. Her plan was simple. He would get to the meeting, have a drink, and the drug would take effect. He would become disoriented, Illinois. It would create chaos, force an end to the meeting. He would be brought home, angry and humiliated, but alive. He would miss the ambush. He came back into the study, dressed in a dark suit, looking like a king going to war. He picked up the briefcase and the bottle of whiskey. He was at the door when he stopped and looked back at her. She was standing by the fireplace, wringing her hands in her apron, her face pale with dread. "You are worried," he stated. It was not a question. His gaze was sharp, probing. She met his eyes, the terror and the desperate, foolish love she felt for him rising in her throat. The lie she should have told died on her lips. The truth came out instead, a raw, broken whisper. "I do not want you to go." It was a confession. Not of love, but of something deeper. Of allegiance. For a fleeting second, something in his expression shifted. The hard line of his jaw softened almost imperceptibly. He held her gaze for one long, charged moment, and then he turned and walked out without another word, taking the poison bottle with him. The hours that followed were the longest of her life. She cleaned the study, her movements robotic, her mind screaming. Every passing car on the street outside sounded like the one that would bring the news of his death. Then, just after 10 o'clock, the house erupted in quiet, controlled chaos. Marco's voice was sharp on the phone. Men moved quickly through the halls. A car pulled up. Dante was helped inside, leaning heavily on two of his soldiers. He was pale, his face beaded with sweat, his eyes unfocused. He hadn't even made it to the warehouse. He had collapsed on the way. Her plan had worked. He was alive. The relief that washed over her was so intense it made her dizzy. But it was followed by a new, colder wave of fear. Thorne's ambush had been averted, but he would know something was wrong. His plans had been thwarted by an unforeseen variable. And his attention would inevitably turn to the one person who had been out of place, the maid who was always there, the woman who had looked at Dante with worry in her eyes. Dante recovered quickly, but his confusion hardened into a cold, lethal fury. He knew he hadn't just been sick. A doctor was brought in, blood was drawn. The results came back the next morning. He had been drugged. An investigation began, silent and swift. His men tore the house apart, searching for the source. They found the whiskey bottle, the tiny puncture in the cork, the faint trace of melted wax. His rage turned inward, on his own household, his own sanctuary. It turned on the only person who had been in the room, the only person with the opportunity. It turned on her. He confronted her in the study. The doors were closed. It was just the two of them again. He didn't circle or threaten. He stood before her, his body radiating a tightly controlled violence that was more frightening than any physical blow. He placed the whiskey bottle on the desk between them. "You did this," he said. His voice was a blade of ice. "Who do you work for? Thorne? Did he pay you? Did he threaten you?" She looked at his face, at the fury and the flicker of something else in his eyes. Betrayal. Her reckless act, meant to save him, had proven to him that he was right all along. She was a traitor. This was the end. She could see it in the absolute stillness of his posture, the finality in his gaze. He believed she had tried to kill him, or worse, to hand him over to his enemy. The truth was so much more complicated, so much more insane. And so she gave it to him. All of it. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I did it." His eyes narrowed. "Who are you working for?" "You," she whispered. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Do not lie to me." "I'm not," she said, tears finally breaking free and streaming down her face. "I heard him. The day I dropped the tray. I heard what he said about your brother. About how he was involved. I saw him plant a bug under your desk. I crushed it. And I heard him setting the trap for you at the warehouse. I knew you were going to die. I couldn't tell you. You wouldn't have believed me. So I stopped you." She laid it all bare. The eavesdropping, the bug, the sedative. Her desperate, clumsy, and utterly insane attempt to protect him. She watched his face, expecting the cold disbelief to harden into a death sentence. He stared at her, his expression unreadable, searching her eyes for the lie. He saw only a terrifying, reckless sincerity. He saw a truth so improbable it had to be real. And in that moment of fragile, dangerous understanding, the world exploded. The sharp crack of silenced gunfire echoed from downstairs, followed by a muffled shout. The windows of the study shattered inward, raining glass across the expensive rug. Dante reacted instantly. He moved like a predator, grabbing her arm and pulling her down behind the massive oak desk just as a spray of bullets tore through the space where they had been standing. Thorne had lost his patience. Believing Dante to be weakened and his security in disarray from the internal investigation, he had made his move. The attack she had tried to prevent had come to them. The study became a war zone. Dante pushed a heavy, silver-plated pistol into her hands. "Stay down. Do not move from here," he commanded, his voice a low, urgent growl. He moved away from her, using the furniture as cover, firing back with lethal precision. the air filled with the smell of gunpowder and plaster dust. It was chaos, loud and brutal. Olivia huddled behind the desk, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. She was not a soldier. She was a maid. But watching Dante move, seeing him fight for his life, for his home, something inside her shifted. He was outnumbered. Through the splintered leg of a chair, she saw one of Thorne's men flanking him, raising his weapon for a clear shot at Dante's exposed back. There was no time to think. Dante was going to die. She acted. Her hand found the base of a heavy bronze bust of some long-dead Roman emperor that sat on the corner of the desk. With a surge of adrenaline, she lifted the heavy object and hurled it with all her strength. It flew through the air, end over end, and struck the gunman's arm with a sickening crunch. His shot went wide, burying itself in the wall. The sound of his scream of pain was cut short as Dante turned, his response immediate and final. The opening she created was all he needed. He regained the advantage, pressing the attack. The firefight was brutal but brief. Soon, an unnerving silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. It was over. His men had contained the breach downstairs. Thorne's assault had failed. They were alone in the wreckage of his study. Smoke hung in the air. Dante stood over the body of the man she had stopped, his chest heaving. He had a long, bleeding graze along his forearm where a bullet had torn through his suit jacket. She pushed herself up, her whole body trembling. Her uniform was ripped at the shoulder, smudged with dust. She saw the blood on his arm and moved toward him without thinking, her hands reaching for the wound. Survival. Care. It was all she knew. He stopped her, his good hand closing gently over her wrist. His touch was warm, firm. He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. The cold mask was gone. In his eyes, she saw a raw, unguarded emotion she could not name. "You bled for me," he said, his voice rough. It was not an apology for doubting her. It was not a thank you for saving his life. It was a statement of fact, of a debt incurred and acknowledged. It was everything. He looked at the chaos around them, at the proof of her insane story. "No one," he added, his voice barely a whisper, "has ever done that." The cost of the night was written in the destruction around them. The mansion was no longer a fortress. His trust in his own judgment had been shattered. Her old life, the simple anonymity of a girl in a blue uniform, was gone forever, burned away in the firefight. She could never go back. As dawn began to break, painting the bruised sky in shades of gray and pink, Dante stood by the shattered window, looking out over his city. The bodies had been removed, the evidence of the battle cleared away with a quiet, ruthless efficiency by his men. But the scent of cordite still clung to the curtains, a ghost of the violence. Olivia stood a few feet away, near the door. For the first time since she had dropped that tray, the way out was clear. No one was guarding her. The immediate danger was past. She could walk out of this room, out of this house, out of this life, and never look back. Every rational instinct screamed at her to run. But she did not move. He turned from the window, his dark eyes finding hers across the ruined study. The space between them was filled with everything that had happened, the secrets, the fear, the blood. He did not ask her to stay. He did not smile or offer any words of comfort. He didn't need to. He simply held her gaze, and in the profound silence, a new kind of contract was written. It was not an oath of love, not yet. It was something harder, something forged in smoke and terror, and earned with a loyalty that defied all logic. It was a promise, made without a single word, that what was his, he protected. And she, with her eyes wide open to the wreckage and the danger, made her choice. She stayed.